Amanda. So this is an explanation for you of how to take your group information for a number of people per week and change it into 1,000,000 people per month and 1,000,000 people per year. So let's say, and this isn't going to be your exact information, but let's say that you start with 3 people and $24 per week as your total cost for what you had. And we chose those because these will be somewhat nice numbers. So if we start off with 3 people and total you pay $24 per week, we can find out the average cost of 1 person per week. And we can do that by taking the cost per week, which is $24 for 3 people. And if we divide those $24 by 3, we end up with $8. And if we divide those 3 people by 3, then we end up with 1 person. So in this case, 1 person would pay $8 per week. Now, if we rewrite this as a fraction, $24 over 3 people, and divide numerator and denominator by 3, we get the same fraction that we ended up with, which is $8 per 1 person. This is just finding the average or the mean for 1 person per week. Now, knowing that we have, in this case, $8 for 1 person for a week, again, by taking the $24 that we had in our example for 3 people, dividing it by this 3 people, and together ending up with $8 on average per person per week from your group. Now, knowing 1 person's example per week, we can find out 1 person's cost more or less per year. So we said from the previous slide that there were $8 per person. This is per week, or $8 for 1 week. Now, we have 52 weeks in a year, so we can multiply the denominator of our $8 per 1 week fraction by 52 to end up with the year, which means we have to multiply our $8 by 52 also. If 1 person is paying about $8 per week, multiplying that by 52 will give you the amount of money that they will pay per year. 8 times 52 is $416 per 52 weeks, which is the same as 1 year. So, to get from your group information to the people per year, you find the average per person, and then you multiply that person's cost by 52, because the cost there is for a week, and you multiply it by 52 because there are 52 weeks in a year. If your group's example is per day instead of per week, if this were for some reason $8 per day, then you have to multiply that cost by 365, because there are 365 days in a year. But again, this is only if your cost is per day. Your cost should be per week because that's how your data was gathered. So multiply it by 52 and we end up with a cost of 1 person per year. Now that we know the cost of 1 person per year, we can start with 1,000,000 people per year. 1 person spends $416 for a year. If each person spends $416, we can just multiply that by 1,000,000. For each of 1,000,000 people that are spending, we're guesstimating the same thing, and we end up with $416 million, because 416 times 1,000,000 is, well, 416 million. Again, from the 1 person per week, we can multiply it by 52 as we did before to get to the 1 person per year. Now, we're going to multiply that person per year times 1,000,000 to get to, 3 more zeros, to get to 1,000,000 people per year. So in our project here, remember that we have $56 million in expenses. I'm going to write this as just 56 million. 56 million as expenses that we have to take into account. The company may have made, in this example, $416 million, but they've already paid $56 million in expenses. And finally, to go to 1,000,000 people per month, we have our $416 million. There are 12 months in a year. So let's divide that by 12, assuming that it's going to be relatively even. It's not going to be perfectly even because not every month is the exact same length, but we can assume it will be somewhat relatively even. And then in that case, 416 million divided by 12 is going to be 34, and then you get a repeating decimal, 0.6 repeating million. per month. That is 1 million people per month. Because we took the 1 million people per year, let's make that green instead. 1 million people per year, divided it by 12 months in a year, and ended up with what we would round to $34.7 million per month. So let's go through those examples one more time. If we say that our example is that there are 3 people in the group and there are $24 per week. Well, first we want to find the average cost per person per week. So we find the mean. Now, if there are 4 people in your group, you're going to divide by 4. If there are 3 people in your group, you're going to divide by 3. 3 people pay $24 total. Their average, their mean, is $8 per person per week. Multiply that by 52 weeks in a year and end up with $416 per year. Take that $416 and multiply it by a million to get the million people cost, or million people income for the company, which is $416 million. And then finally, divide that cost by 12 because there are 12 months in a year to get about $34.7 million per month for the company for 1 million people.